Hi, I'm Stan DeFreitas, Mr. Greenthumb.
And I'm James DeFreitas with the Ask Mr. Greenthumb TV gardening series.
Now, many of you don't know that my son is extremely talented, not only as an editor and co-host, but he builds things. He's built all kinds of things, and I asked him if he could do me a project building me a box that would not just rot out in a year. And James, why did you choose some of the material that you did?
Well, the first thing that I did is I started looking around to see what was available. What could you buy out of a catalog? And I was a little bit disappointed, to say the least. What I noticed is that some companies started to go down the right avenue by creating stuff like out of metal. And I think metal is a great product because at least, there's some permanence to it.
Sure.
The problem is that if you're just going to use steel anywhere in the South, it's going to rust after a couple of seasons, and even up north, they salt the roads a lot.
Yeah, they call it the Rust Belt up there.
And for good reason. And part of that is, it's just not going to last. And so the other thought behind the motivating factor for this was not only the longevity part of it, but what about people that have mobility concerns? Those that, what if you can't bend over? And even the earth boxes. Earth boxes are great. Not knocking the earth boxes, but what I am going to say is they're only 13 inches tall. So the problem that I have is that, if you're dealing with an earth box, you're still bending over and you're hunched, and if you have back trouble, that's not such a great thing.
I can identify with that.
So, and in that relation, I thought, well, why don't we build something out of aluminum and out of PVC vinyl? And those are two materials that, are going to last a long time. So we thought today, on today's episode, I'd show you how to build an elevated planted box. That all of these materials that we're going to use today, it was sourced from a local big box store. It's not material I had ordered in, so it's stuff you could go get, and it really is a project you could do yourself. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to spend the next, several minutes. We'll probably put it on fast forward because you probably don't want to watch every little detail of me putting this together because it's a little time consuming. But nonetheless, it should be a action doing something segment.
People always love those, and I think we're very blessed to have someone who has the talent that you have with this project.
Thanks.
Now, James, since you've finished this project, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about how you put it together?
Sure. Well, and as I mentioned before, we used aluminum, which again, you can get at your big box store, and I just cut it. Now, one of the things I want to definitely mention, if you're working with aluminum or any type of metal, it's sharp. And for the folks out there, please use gloves. I used gloves when I was cutting it. Don't have any gloves in front of me right at the moment, but I definitely did. So if you're going to attempt to do a project like this, make sure you think of safety first. The other thing too is that I wear eyeglasses, so I've always had some safety glasses on. So if you're going to cut metal, again, I would recommend using eyeglasses and gloves to perfectly protect yourself. So that's something we wanted to make sure we mentioned for sure. I cut the metal and I made sure that the box was at 32 inches, which I thought was a nice waist-high height to make it easier for anybody that doesn't want to bend over. And I think that's incredibly important too, because there's so many projects that I see out there and people are constantly bending over, and I'm not sure that's real great for your back, especially the older you get. So.
With millions of people out there, and I can identify, having had back surgery, what I used to be able to do and what I can do now. I still love to garden, but getting down and getting back up, as a youngster, I would have laughed and said, well, that's not ever going to be me. But like with so many other things in life, you say it's not going to be me, and then it is. Until it is.
Until it is, exactly. So just to kind of finish off the construction here, we used stainless steel bolts to bolt the aluminum corner brackets to the two boxes of PVC that we've got here. So again, I basically have used everything that I could think of that would stand the test of time. I mean, I honestly believe this box is something people can have for a lifetime. I mean, this is something that I think will last probably a good 50 years.
Which I think is great, because I've seen some projects, where they make it out of wood and water have problems. I mean, it's bad enough for a tree that's got outer bark that has problems sometimes, but with wood and water, you're talking maybe a year, maybe two if you're lucky, the thing's going to last. And how many times do you want to have to go out and rebuild something? So I think it's just really smart on your part to pick, the aluminum, the stainless steel, and the kind of the vinyl board that will not have problems. I would think this thing could outlive me for sure, and maybe outlive you.
It might. And the other thing too, if people are curious what we built the floors with, it's just composite fiber decking. And again, I just found whatever the cheapest was at the big box store, cut it in 2-foot lengths, and inset it inside the box, and then I used brad nails to install it with. So it's, again, if you're going to have, traditionally, what I saw in a lot of the catalogs, and I'm not knocking what I saw in the catalogs, I'm sure a lot of those products are just fine, but again, finding aluminum was tricky as far as the main mechanism holding the box together.
Right.
I didn't see any stainless steel hardware being used to hold the frame together. And the other thing that I saw is that there's a big fascination with cedar. Yeah. And maybe in Nevada, cedar is a wonderful building option, and maybe that would be a great thing to build a planter box out of. Yep. But in Florida or in the South, it's anywhere where it gets really wet or rainy, and I would even argue up north, probably not the best item to build out of either, because with the snow and the icing of the roads and all of that, that's probably not great either.
Water and wood just aren't a great combination for long term, unless you're going to coat it with something to where you make it almost like this, and I've not seen that done. You'd almost have to coat everything with urethane, probably a quarter, half-inch thick, and that would be expensive and hard to work with.
Right, and I'm not sure at that point, I'm not sure the health benefits would be there either. Anytime you start to get too much chemicals around something you're going to grow and eat, it's not the best. So at least all of this stuff is closed-celled vinyl, and should be perfectly fine for people to grow and use year after year.
And you also have some slats here where we've got some spacing in between.
That's a good point. Yeah, that we spoke of this when I started to build this. I said, hey, space or no space. And
I said either tight. If you do tight, you're going to have to make holes.
Right.
And if you give them a little bit of spacing, which you did, then there'll be a natural draining period. And water is important to life. It's the key. But too much water can be a problem as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So we wanted to make sure it had good drainage. And it looks to me like we'll have ample space to plant some great plants in here. And it should last for a lifetime.
It's going to be wonderful. And now to the most important part is we've got something to fill in this wonderful box that you made.
Absolutely. It looks like you have went out and got some colorful plants to put into this. What's going on in here?
Well, we've got a plethora of different things, and probably a little more than I'll actually plant into this box, but I like things full. And we've got some watermelons over here, and this is a little crimson watermelon. I wanted to get something that was going to produce a nice watermelon, maybe one that wasn't going to, it'll probably grow over the box.
Okay.
But that's fine. One of the problems I've had with the cucurbit group and cucumbers and melons is they get into mildew.
I'm sorry, what group?
The cucurbit?
I've never heard of that before.
Well, it's the cucumber group.
Okay.
And the melon group is a second cousin of it. The problem I have is that most of this group, when it lays on the ground, it often gets into fungus. It gets into mildews, it gets into powdery mildew, downy mildew, and that can be a problem. So, beauty of you're building this box is that we've got it off the ground.
Nice. Nice, okay. And what are these, marigolds?
Yeah, I just want a little companion planting. People sometimes ask us about what would you normally plant with something. Well, marigolds may help get rid of some of the beasties, and it also may help, it's pretty, so that helps make it look nicer. And some of the insects don't seem to like the fragrance. You know, marigolds have sort of that marigold smell, and it seems like some of the insects go, maybe we'll move on to something else. And if they do that, that's a good thing.
Absolutely. So this is kind of the magic time where we actually get to use the box for its intended purpose by putting all these beautiful plants in here. And of course, make sure you use really good soil, and that'll be a good foundation for making you have success with this. And you've got some other plants up here. Now, what do we have here?
Now, those are some just pole beans, but
Okay.
I like pole beans because they give you, gracious plenty.
You were saying Blue Lake bush beans.
Yes, it's a Blue Lake is a variety.
Okay.
And a bush just means it's going to stay small. It doesn't have to have a trellis to climb on.
Okay.
I mean, not that you couldn't put a trellis on this.
Yeah, you certainly could. Then you would really go high.
Oh, if you want to impress your neighbors, you could put a trellis here and have it go up 10 feet, and you'd have the 12-foot plant. But I don't know if you need to do that. But I do like the idea of having this. Now, we're going to let the water go through it. We could actually made it tight and put a drainage hole, and we could have had a pump, and we could have made it into almost a hydroponic unit. So that's something we could have done as well. And often, in fact, that thought went through my brain that we could adapt it sometime in the future to make it a hydroponic unit.
Sure, that would be great.
With us, of course, I'd also probably use some kind of good fertilizer. This happens to be the dynamite. It's a time released, and something like this, you want to make sure you put your mix in with it. I'd use a good potting soil, and I'm also going to add some black cow manure to hold that water, hold those nutrients, and to just make everything bloom and produce as well as we can. I like watermelons. I also like, this happens to be a mint. We've showed you mints before, but not a variegated one. This is called pineapple mint, and it makes a really nice addition to jelly and things like that. If you're a canner, you put a little sprig of Clean It, put it in there with it, and it'll add that to that, or puddings, or Jello, or...
Well, and one other thing I'm not sure we mentioned before, but the total cost that we had in making this particular box was about $160. Now, I know that sounds like a lot because that doesn't include the labor of putting it together, which took a couple of hours. But I did want to mention that. And the other thing is I will put instructions in the comments section below as to what I used, how I used it, and so that way when people at home, if you get ambitious and you want to try to do something like this, you'll have a little bit more data to help you along with that.
And if you'd like to do this project, yes, it's a little bit expensive, as James mentioned, but you don't have to do it again every year. And that's one of the things I hated and stuff with wood. I'd put out a wooden area, and then I'd have termites, and I'd have rot, and I'd have all kind of problems, and I'd go, oh, wasn't this good? Yeah, I mean, one of my neighbors said, why didn't you just use some scrap wood around here? Because I said in 6 months I'd have termites, and John wouldn't have his wood pile. So,
Well, and again, it doesn't look very aesthetically pleasing, and I think this is a much better looking type of thing because, let's face it, it's not just something that we put plants into. Plants beautify the world, but we also like the item that they're going to be put into to also look nice, and I think that fits the bill.
I think you did an exquisite job. You made it look beautiful, and I think it's functional. And as always, James always comes up with good projects, and he makes them look good at the end.
If you like this episode, make sure you hit the like button, and we'd love to have more subscribers. So go ahead and subscribe too. Thanks.
Thank you.